If you have an older CPU and a newer GPU, and it doesn't even need to be that new. This applied to my old GPU, which was a GeForce 1650. So that's pretty old. You can find ways to optimize your gaming experience if you're into Twitch gaming or anything else that requires really fast frame rates with an older CPU. I have a 10-year-old Intel 3770K. Now, before we get into the GPU side of things, there's a CPU aspect to this. First off, I play UT3 to keep my reflexes ultra sharp, because I'm sure you already know that's pretty fast. Well, that is a single-threaded app. In fact, most of the fast FPS type stuff from that era, even later titles, were still single-threaded. There's a really big thing you can do right off the bat, and that is go into your BIOS and disable all of your extra cores. You only need one. Why would you do that? Because then you can increase your clock speed dramatically. In my case, I raised my multiplier to 43. So 4.3 gigahertz, which is simple to do on an unlocked CPU. So that aside, that's something you really should do. Now let's get into what's happening over here. On my 4K monitor, as you can see, my highest refresh rate is 29 hertz. And I'll tell you, that hurts. Anyways, obviously you're not going to be doing 4K gaming on a 10-year-old CPU. The faster refresh rates are available officially on my panel at 1920 by 1080. But I made a discovery. I was digging around and I found an undocumented mode, 1440 by 900 at 120 hertz. That changed everything. Now, it may not make a lot of sense at first thought. Why would you want to go even lower than 1920 by 1080? But I have to tell you that, I mean, you already know, chances are, that your CPU is the bottleneck in your system if you have a fast GPU. The lower that you set your resolution, the faster that your CPU can spit out those frames to the GPU to process. And it makes a huge difference dropping down to 1440. So the first thing you have to do is find out for your monitor what are your options for lower resolutions at high refresh rates. And make sure that you're dealing with native resolutions. My monitor does not officially have this as a native resolution. I just stumbled upon it by playing around and seeing what I could find. And in both of these cases, 1920 and 1440, I had to create a custom resolution to do that, because out of the box, they only gave 60 hertz, and that's useless. To get to 120, I had to create a custom resolution. Now, that's where there's a real problem if you're not going to do what I'm about to show you. So do what I'm about to show you. So let's get into the Manage 3D settings where we can see what's happening here. Because you may be asking the question, and you would be right to ask it, why not just use DSR? The problem is that because of my monitor requiring a custom resolution to be able to get those faster refresh rates, I can't use DSR because DSR disables custom resolutions for whatever reason. It's something going on under the hood with the video card itself. So that's just not an option if you, like me, have to use custom resolution to be able to get those faster refresh rates. But there's a better option anyways, and that is because your GPU is already waiting around for your CPU to throw frames at it, just use anti-aliasing. It's going to be free. But don't just use the official anti-aliasing. Keep that off. Forget about that. Use FXAA because FXAA uses a shader to do it. And the reason that that's important is because even when it's free, the official modes of anti-aliasing, the original ones, impose a lag. It creates latency that wouldn't be there otherwise. And so forget about that. Use FXAA. And then you really will get free anti-aliasing. And with the increased speed that you get from your CPU by doing the reduced resolution and by getting rid of unused cores and increasing your clock rate. Because if you think about it, if you have a multi-core CPU, but you turn off most of those cores, then it's not going to produce as much heat. And heat is the only reason, well, the primary reason, that you can't raise your clock speed. So when you do those things, then you're just going to have such an increase in frame rate. Oh, and while I'm thinking about it, what I just mentioned about the threading, make sure that you turn threaded optimization off. It defaults to auto, which basically still means on if you have multi-cores. So just keep it off. And also, while I'm thinking about it, since it's right here, set your vertical sync to fast. Obviously, everything I'm talking about here is related to NVIDIA GPUs. So I don't really know what the alternatives are for ATI. And nowadays, soon, it'll be true for Intel as well. But I don't know. I don't know about either of those options. I'm using NVIDIA for obvious reasons. At any rate, set your vertical sync to fast. It's just as fast as off, but without tearing. And what it's doing is throwing away any frames that are rendered above and beyond your refresh rate. And that reminds me also, set your maximum frame rate in terms of what it's going to do on your GPU. So since I'm using 120 Hertz, I'm setting it to 120 FPS. Logical, isn't it? You don't want to waste anything, especially when you're trying to keep resources available for those moments when things get really intense. Low latency mode, set that to ultra, obviously. Same sort of logic applies there. So that's basically it. I've given you everything you need to know there, I think. So just to reiterate what I said off the top, this could work just as well for fairly old GPUs as well. So try it out and see what happens. And hopefully it'll work for you too. Because I got to tell you, for me, this has been really incredible. Very, very tight, very fast. It's a whole different experience. It's quite incredible. and you'll be saying, wow, this old CPU can still fly. Okay, have fun.